One was Nicholas, the extraordinarily handsome young grandson who, at 26, ascended to the throne of Russia on November 1st, 1894. Only days before, the newly crowned Nicholas II had married the beautiful Princess Alexandra, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria. They sadly lacked the iron needed to rule a vast country on its way to revolution. Opposition to the throne, fed by poverty, had taken root. Something powerful and inexorable advanced. Whereas Nicholas's assassinated grandfather had been complex and strong, Nicholas was not. When crises would not disappear, he would escape to the country.
Nicholas recoiled in hostility before anything gifted and significant. He only felt comfortable in the presence of people who were completely brainless and mediocre.
Things came to a boil on Bloody Sunday, January 22nd, 1905. A group of singing workers bearing icons and the mildest of grievances marched to the great square before the Tsar's winter palace. Nicholas, true to form, had left for his country home. Soldiers left behind to guard the palace panicked and fired volley after volley into the marchers. 500 men, women, and children died on blood-stained streets.
As a result of Bloody Sunday, Nicholas was forever alienated from his people, and as the alienation deepened, the possibility of assassination increased.
Throughout the next decade, riots, naval mutinies, and assassinations roared through Russia. The entry of Russia into the Great World War was the final convulsion. The huge Tsarist armies, beset by squabbling and mostly inept generals, turned potential victories into great defeats. As the bloody years of war ground on, only numbers and bravery held the badly led and supplied imperial armies together. The Tsar then did the one thing he could to make matters worse. In September of 1915, a desperate Nicholas went to the front and assumed personal command of the army. Bleeding Russia was left in the hands of the Tsarina, but she had a worry greater than her country. Back in 1904, Alexandra had given birth to a male heir, the Tsarevich Alexis. Born a hemophiliac, the 11-year-old was never far from death. In desperation, Alexandra, a mystic, turned to the powers of a bizarre holy man, Father Grigory Rasputin. His name meant licentious or debauched one.
He was a semi-literate peasant. He had piercing blue eyes. He had a shock of dark hair and an imposing beard. And he had a fervor about him which translated into his pronouncements and into his power over women particularly, because he preached a kind of salvation through sexuality.
He had these charismatic, perhaps hypnotic powers in which he was able to slow the bleeding of the Tsarevich.
It was this association that he had with the Tsarina that really catapulted him to the fore and created a lot of tension between the royal family and the other nobles who were now being excluded from their traditional roles of counseling. Rasputin and the Tsarina were cloistered in the imperial palace, turning over imperial ministers left and right.
Rasputin was against the involvement of Russia in any kind of foreign affairs. And that made him a target, because there were very, very great forces within the government that did want Russia to become involved in wars outside of its borders.
Soon, Rasputin was Tsar above the Tsar. Palace nobles, amid suspicions that Rasputin and the German-born Tsarina were plotting to make peace with Germany, conspired to do away with the mad mystic. The leader of the assassination conspiracy was one of the wealthiest men in Russia, Prince Yusupov. On the night of December 29, 1916, Yusupov and a cabal of nobles, including the zealot Purishkevich, held a party. Yusupov was able to lure Rasputin with the promise of the affections of his beautiful young wife, Irina.
In that room with the prince and Rasputin were 3 cakes and 2 glasses of wine, each of them laced with poison. The idea was if the cakes didn't get him, the wine would.
To cover the noise that could ensue, a record album was put on upstairs by the co-conspirators. Incongruously, the recording was George M. Cohan's sprightly "I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy." When a conspirator observed that creature has swallowed enough cyanide to kill a regiment, a rattled Yusupov went to get his pistol and returned.
Yusupov pulls out his revolver and shoots Rasputin in the chest. Rasputin falls to the floor.
The doctor pronounced him dead, and they went back upstairs for a celebratory glass of wine. During this time, Prince Felix had a uncanny feeling that something was wrong and went back into the room, looked at Rasputin, shook him, and at that time, Rasputin opened his eyes that Prince Felix described as green viper eyes. Rasputin then ran across the courtyard, Purishkevich following him and firing 4 shots, the first 2 of which missed. The second 2 hit him, the first one in the back, the second one in the head, at which point they all congregated around him, were kicking him, and then wrapped the body in the carpet and bound him up and took him over to the Neva River, where they dumped his body and was discovered the next day.
Poisoned, stabbed, beaten, and shot, he still broke his bonds and smashed his way through thick ice. Only drowning finally stopped him.
Instead of the desired effect that the assassins had wanted to achieve, namely breaking the hold of Rasputin over the Tsar and the Tsarina, the two actually become more withdrawn and more recalcitrant and more resistant to any kind of compromise. Rasputin is reported to have prophesied that if he were to be assassinated, the Tsar would not be far behind.
Father Grigory prophesied well. The Romanovs had only 18 months to live.